Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saudara sekalian, bergabung secara online di Zoom meeting ini. Alhamdulillah, akhirnya kita bisa menyelenggarakan kuliah umum dengan menghadirkan tamu dari USIM, University Sains Islam Malaysia. Beliau yang akan menyampaikan kuliah adalah Dr. Fadlina Alias, dosen dan sekaligus kita sebut pejabat, dokter. Pejabat is officer, ya. Pejabat di program studi hukum di USIM Malaysia. Dan topik kita hari ini adalah topik yang berkaitan dengan bioetik. Adapun the specific title of the presentation is choosing between lives in a pandemic, withholding or withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment from Malaysian and Islamic law perspective. Oke, sedikit saya ceritakan tentang topik ini kepada para mahasiswa semua ya. Jadi ini topik berkaitan dengan terapi atau perawatan untuk mempertahankan kehidupan. Dr. Fadlina, I have found in some articles that life-sustaining treatment is translated in different ways. Some authors use the term terapi bantuan hidup. Others use the term perawatan penopang kehidupan.
Perawatan penopang kehidupan.
So kepada mahasiswa ya, jadi kita pernah bicara tentang dilema etik yang dihadapi oleh dokter, ya. Dalam hal ini kita mempelajari tentang satu kondisi pasien yang membutuhkan perawatan khusus agar bisa bertahan hidup. Nah, kadang-kadang muncul pertanyaan apakah perawatan seperti ini perlu diteruskan, apakah dihentikan? Nah, inilah yang akan dibicarakan oleh Dr. Fadlina, dan Dr. Fadlina akan bicara tentang topik ini dari perspektif hukum di Malaysia dan juga hukum Islam ya. I think this comparative analysis will be very interesting for us.
Insyaallah.
Okay, for your information, Dr. Fadlina, that we currently in this semester, okay, I'm teaching 6 classes of a law subject.
Okay, banyak tu.
Okay, because in Muhammadiyah University, the subject is right now obligatory. So all students will take the subject, and currently I handle 6 classes. 5 classes are regular classes, and another one is international class. In international class, we use English as the medium of instruction, but in regular class we use Bahasa Indonesia. So to allow all students enjoy and take the benefit from this lecture, you can use both Bahasa Melayu and English. Okay, Dr. Fadlina is an expert in bioethics. Yeah, we are share the same experience of undergoing PhD journey under the same professor, but we have different concerns. I concerns on medical malpractice law, while Dr. Fadlina concerns on bioethics. I think this is part of her research. This is very interesting topic actually, and this is actually a new topic also for me. So I have to read more to understand about this issue. Okay, without further ado, I think we can start the presentation very soon right now. And my dear brothers and sisters, let's pay your attention to the presentation from Dr. Fadlina Alias. Dr. Fadlina, time is yours.
Thank you, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, clear.
Okay. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir, Rabbi tamin bil khair. Pertama sekali saya ingin merakamkan penghargaan ucapan terima kasih yang tidak terhingga kepada sahabat saya, rakan sepengajian saya Dr. Andrew Susila, kerana menjemput saya untuk berkongsi sedikit ilmu yang saya ada tentang topik pada hari ini. And I'm very happy to meet all of you, seeing your faces from Indonesia. InsyaAllah satu hari harapnya kita dapat saling mengunjungi ya, Dr. Andrew. Saya pun dah lama tidak ke sana, Dr. Andrew pun dah lama tidak ke Malaysia. Jadi I hope I will not bore you, saya tidak membosankan kalian pada petang ini insyaAllah. Saya akan cuba membuatkan kuliah ini semenarik mungkin insyaAllah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, jadi saya akan share screen sekarang. I have prepared slides for this presentation. Bismillah, sebentar ya. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. Is it showing? Yes, insyaAllah. Okay, let's start. Sorry, yeah, okay. So just to give you a bit of background, my PhD was in medical law, sama seperti Dr. Andrew juga, tapi seperti yang diterangkan oleh Dr. Andrew, kami specializationnya berbeda. Okay, he was on medical negligence malpractice in Indonesia, a comparative study, and mine was on end of life care. Di Malaysia kita mentafsirkan end of life care itu sebagai rawatan penjagaan kesihatan di akhir hayat, when patients are dying. Yeah, and you are very lucky because health law is a compulsory subject for you. Di USIM, di universitas saya, itu adalah subjek elektif, maknanya pilihan. Tidak semua pelajar yang akan mempelajari tentang undang-undang perubatan. Okay, kenapa saya memilih topik ini adalah kerana saya memikirkan dalam keadaan sekarang ya, where we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. Now it's towards the endemic, kerana kita perlu belajar untuk hidup dengan virus ini. Seperti mana kita belajar hidup dengan virus selsema, kalau di Malaysia dengan virus dengue fever, okay, benda tu dia sentiasa ada. Cuma daripada segi pengawalan dan vaksinasi saja yang melindungi manusia lah, melindungi kami daripada insyaAllah dalam keadaan yang lebih selamat lah, okay, di dalam endemik ini. So we tend to take for granted what happens in the ICU of hospitals, unit rawatan rapi di hospital-hospital. Apa yang perlu dihadapi oleh pakar perubatan apabila mendapat kes-kes sebegini. Seperti mana yang Dr. Andrew sebutkan, what if there are enough ventilators, alat bantu pernafasan yang mencukupi untuk setiap pesakit? Who do we save first? Who do we save later? Who do we not save? Okay, jadi ini adalah dilema yang sangat menekan sebenarnya, dan kita tidak tahu apa yang doktor hadapi melainkan kita sendiri menjadi pesakit ataupun orang yang kita sayangi berada dalam keadaan itu. Alright, so I think it's important now for everyone to start understanding the dilemmas of the doctors and what they base their actions on. Apakah etika yang terpakai untuk mereka membuat keputusan itu? Adakah keputusan itu sah di segi undang-undang? Adakah itu daripada segi sudut pandang Islam sesuatu yang dibenarkan contohnya? So that's the reason why I chose this topic. Okay, so we will continue. Now this is the outline of my presentation, which I hope to complete within 1 hour inshallah. Please let me know if I'm out of time, but within an hour I should like to explain to you and share with you all these subtopics. Ya. Jadi saya nak kongsi juga, ini adalah keratan-keratan akhbar. Mungkin saya perlu kecilkan screen ke besar. Okay. Keratan-keratan akhbar di Malaysia berkaitan dengan satu situasi kritikal yang tidak lama dahulu berlaku dalam bulan Jun hingga Julai 2021 tahun lepas. Okay. So we know that the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a shock to the whole world in March of 2020. the first coronavirus was detected in Wuhan of China and then spread very extensively to all countries all over the world, dan banyak negara-negara yang telah menjalankan lockdown, perintah berkurung untuk mengawal, melihat bagaimana situasi ini boleh dikawal, bagaimana untuk menangani situasi yang tidak terjangka ini. So in June and July of 2021, the third wave, gelombang ketiga coronavirus menghentam Malaysia, dan dia berlaku satu kejutan yang mana pesakit-pesakit yang datang ke hospital pada waktu itu sudah pun dalam kategori yang serius, iaitu the 4th and 5th stages of the disease. So in the 4th and 5th stages of the disease, there is a difficulty of breathing on your own, and that required for them to be put in ICU and be attached to mechanical ventilators, alat bantuan pernafasan, kerana paru-paru itu mengeras, tidak mampu lagi berkontraksi. I don't know whether that's the word in bahasa Indonesia, tapi your lungs could not contract to pump in oxygen. So when that happened, we suddenly realized that we had limited resources. There weren't enough resources. Sumber perubatan itu terhad. Kerana ventilator, mesin bantuan pernafasan itu adalah satu sumber perubatan yang memang terhad. It's limited resources. It's not available for everyone. In one hospital, you might have 10 to 15 ventilators. So when the swarm of patients came because they were suffering from stage 4 and 5 of the coronavirus, we didn't have enough beds, katil tidak mencukupi, staf-staf perubatan juga tidak cukup yang terlatih untuk memasukkan tube itu dan alat bantuan pernafasan. You need to intubate the patient. So we lacked human resource, and also the ventilators were not enough. It was a very serious situation in Malaysia. Alhamdulillah, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we have gotten over it, but this shows you how serious it was. Okay. Medical frontliners face limited resources, forced to play God as COVID-19 cases spike in Kuala Lumpur and Selangor, having to choose between lives because there weren't enough ventilators to go about and save everyone. And you must remember, ventilators ni, alat bantuan pernafasan ini tidak hanya untuk pesakit-pesakit COVID-19. You already have cancer patients being intubated, people who suffer from serious accidents, kemalangan yang menyebabkan mereka terpaksa disambungkan ke alat bantuan pernafasan. You also had those suffering from severe respiratory illness, asthma yang serius juga memerlukan bantuan pernafasan. Dan ini kan lagi dengan bilangan pesakit COVID-19 yang serius yang juga datang untuk mendapatkan rawatan yang sama di hospital. Okay. So to properly start, sebenarnya dah mula dah kan. To properly start, I should explain what is end of life care. Apa itu penjagaan kesihatan di akhir hayat? Kerana kita tidak semua kita kita ada latar belakang perubatan. We don't all come from a medical background. So when we talk about end of life care, we are talking about providing care and comfort, rawatan dan keselesaan to patients who suffer from life-limiting illnesses, who are terminally ill, pesakit terminal, who suffer from incurable diseases, penyakit yang tidak ada ubatnya, daripada segi perubatan lah ya, saya tidak bercakap daripada falsafah Islam, and also those who are in the final stages of their lives. Maknanya doktor mungkin dah bagi pesakit ini mungkin ada 6 bulan lagi untuk hidup. So itulah rawatan perubatan yang kita bincangkan pada hari ini. So end of life care is not like normal treatment. It is not treatment to cure. Bukan treatment, bukan rawatan untuk mengubati, tetapi lebih kepada rawatan untuk memastikan pesakit ini berada di dalam keadaan yang selesa mungkin, to give the patient that quality of life, that support, so that he can spend the rest of his days in comfort, seselesa mungkin. So it addresses the physical, spiritual, emotional and social needs of patients. Okay. Saya mulakan dengan tafsiran euthanasia. Kerana saya rasa perlu untuk kita bezakan antara euthanasia dan withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Ia bukan benda yang sama ya. Jadi untuk mengelakkan kekeliruan, saya ingin pertama sekali menerangkan tentang euthanasia. You might be familiar with another term. They call it mercy killing. Mercy killing is also a term that is referred to euthanasia. Okay, now from the what end of life care is, generally euthanasia is when a doctor introduces an external agent. Okay, lebih mudah untuk dikatakan apabila doktor memberi satu ubatan yang mana ubat itu akan membawa kepada kematian pesakit. Okay, it leads to the death of the patient for the purpose of relieving the patient from unbearable pain. So that's the general meaning of euthanasia. Okay, from the healthcare perspective, it is when the doctor, either the doctor himself injects the patient, okay, with a lethal drug, satu dadah yang akan membunuh, membawa kepada kematian, ataupun boleh jadi pesakit itu meminta kepada doktor untuk diberikan ubat-ubatan yang apabila pesakit itu ambil dengan sendiri akan menamatkan riwayat pesakit tersebut. So that's euthanasia. Alright. Now this has to be differentiated from withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Now, withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment is a common occurrence in ICUs. Okay, adalah perkara yang biasa terjadi, biasa terpaksa dilaksanakan oleh para doktor di dalam unit rawatan rapi, okay, the intensive care units of hospitals. And this includes several aspects. Okay, one of it, sebagai contoh, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or in its short form is called CPR. So when the patient's heart stops beating, then the doctor resuscitates the patient in order to bring back the patient to life, contohnya. Also, there's what is known as what I'm discussing right now lah, yang penting untuk perbincangan kita pada hari ini adalah mechanical ventilation. Okay, so this is a machine that the patient is intubated, and that machine delivers oxygen to the patient's body because the patient is unable to breathe on his own. And then we also have another life-sustaining treatment, which is in the form of artificial nutrition and hydration. Okay, pemberian nutrisi dan liquids lah, air kepada pesakit melalui, bukan melalui mulut, tapi as you know, it's mainly through a drip. Okay, so the doctor delivers the nutrition and hydration through a tube that goes into the blood vessels of the patient. Okay, sometimes it's directly into the stomach of the patient because the patient is unable to eat or drink on his or her own. Okay, I'm going to play you a clip. Petang-petang ini kalau dengar Dr. Ina bercakap saja mungkin dah mula rasa terbuai-buai, mengantuk. Jadi I'm going to play a video. Now I'm sorry, the video, I'm unable to embed the video. So what I will do is that I will stop sharing first. Okay, and then I will share with you the actual clip. It's not long, it's only 2 minutes. But I want you to get a feel of how it is to make that difficult decision whether to continue the treatment or withdraw the treatment in an ICU. Okay, bismillah. Kita sama-sama lihat ya. Mana saya letak? Oh, ada di sini. Okay. So you can see my screen. I'm gonna besarkan. Maybe I should share the computer sound as well so that you can hear what the doctor's saying. Yeah, sorry. Let me reshare again. Share sound. Okay. Bismillah. All right. Okay.
In the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, a family gathers. Gendalina Lara Murillo has been kept alive on a ventilator for the last 5 days.
She's not doing well. She's dying. Very difficult. We know.
With every major organ failing from end-stage liver disease, her family is now faced with taking her off life support.
We have a decision to make. One of the decisions is whether we should take the tube from the mouth and take it out. Does he have thoughts about that?
Yes.
Okay. So let me prepare you for what may happen. The ICU is at the apex of life and death. We give a little bit of dose of the sedative to make sure she feels no pain. We have a tremendous amount of technology that prolong life. But ultimately, we can't overcome the patient's illness in most cases. They have cancer. They have kidney disease. They have end-stage liver disease. They have these diseases that are life-shortening. After we remove the tube, now if you look at the history of critical care, we don't know how the idea of an intensive care unit was for you to come there with a life-threatening illness and respond to the treatment and get better. Unfortunately, what's happened is that Americans are now coming to ICUs to die. Okay.
All right, I'm just going to stop there. It goes longer than that, but I hope that gave you that kind of, can you feel the intensity of the situation? It's not easy. Every time I listen to this clip, I get goosebumps. Sebab saya pernah berada dalam situasi itu sendiri dengan ahli keluarga yang tercinta. Jadi keputusan yang perlu dibuat, ya, you can see that the doctor wanted to extubate, to take out the life support, and this would bring about slowly, not necessarily slowly, but it would the patient would die of natural causes lah, because of the underlying disease. The patient would eventually pass away. Okay, so it's a decision that's not only difficult for it's a decision that's not only difficult for the family members and also the patient, but also the doctors, okay, the doctors themselves. All right, let me just continue. Are you seeing my screen again, my slides? Dia tak bergerak pula. Okay, there you go. All right, now, before I talk about the Malaysian law, the Malaysian perspective on this, I need to talk about the common law in England. And why is it necessary? It's because the historical significance of English law in relation to Malaysia. Now, Malaysia pernah dijajah oleh Inggeris pada kurun ke-19 dan kurun ke-20 Masihi, ya. So because of that, our legal system is very much inherited from the English legal system. And that means that if there is any lacuna in the law, lacuna adalah adanya kelompongan dalam undang-undang, maknanya tidak ada undang-undang tertentu di Malaysia tentang isu tersebut, maka kita akan melihat dan merujuk kepada bagaimana isu itu ditentukan by the common law of England, okay, in the UK. So this area of end-of-life care is not a matter which there is a law in Malaysia to govern it. And that is why the common law principles in England are very much relevant for the judges in Malaysia to refer to, untuk dijadikan panduan bagi menentukan isu-isu yang tidak ada peruntukan undang-undang yang khusus di Malaysia. So the landmark case on withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment is the case of Airedale, NHS Trust and Bland. It is a House of Lords case, so it is a case at the highest court of appeal at that point of time in England. And what happened is this: in 15 April 1989, there was a FA Cup match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. Saya percaya ada kalangan pelajar yang meminati mungkin Liga Bola Sepak Inggeris. So Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, big clubs. So it was the semi-finals. So you can imagine the number of people, the huge crowd that came to watch that semi-final game. It was held in Sheffield, England, at the Hillsborough Stadium. This is a picture of poor Anthony Bland, salah seorang mangsa dalam kejadian yang berlaku di Stadium Hillsborough itu. This was him before he walked to the stadium and eventually met with his death. Okay. Now, what happened was that there was a mismanagement of crowd control. Okay, terlalu ramai sangat orang, jadi mereka menutup beberapa pintu dan hanya membuka satu pintu saja untuk masuk, sedangkan di dalam itu sudah sangat-sangat penuh, sangat-sangat padat. So when people kept coming in, this resulted in a human crush. People were crushed to death. Okay, 95 people met their end on that day, unfortunately. And Anthony Bland did survive, but he survived in a persistent vegetative state. Okay, because he suffered irreversible damage to his brain. Okay, dia ada brain damage yang sangat serious. His front lobe, I think I can show you a picture. Okay, this is the cerebral cortex here. All right, so what the cerebral cortex of our brain does is dia mengawal fungsi-fungsi kognitif, our ability to communicate, our kesedaran, the consciousness of the patient, the ability to hear, the ability to see. So of course, when this part is damaged, you will be unconscious, takkan sedar apa yang berlaku di sekeliling, and also the ability to breathe. Alright, jadi Anthony Bland ini tidak mampu untuk bernafas dengan sendiri. He's bedridden, everything the nurses do for him. So he was in this persistent vegetative state for 3.5 years. Yeah, so after 3.5 years, the doctors who treated Anthony Bland decided to go to court to seek a declaration on their decision to withdraw life support from Anthony Bland. Okay, because there was no improvement, he would be in that condition indefinitely. Okay, dia akan selama-lamanya berada dalam keadaan itu. Dia tidak akan sedar kembali ataupun sembuh. Jadi apabila perkara itu dibawa ke mahkamah, the parents of Anthony Bland juga bersetuju, tidaklah ada halangan terhadap tindakan doktor tersebut. Cuma doktor mahukan satu pengesahan ataupun confirmation that if they do that, it will be legal. It will be legally justified. Okay. So the courts actually did give that declaration to the doctors, and the life support was withdrawn, ditarik daripada Anthony Bland, and he died very soon after. So he was the last victim of the Hillsborough disaster, which is known as the worst football disaster in the UK. Now, the case of Anthony Bland laid down a lot of legal principles, yeah, relating to withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Okay, mahkamah telah membezakan antara euthanasia dan tindakan untuk menarik balik alat bantuan pernafasan tersebut. So the court relied on the act omission distinction. For euthanasia, it is an act. It's considered to be an act. Kerana dalam kes euthanasia, doktor akan memberi satu lethal injection, okay, untuk menaikkan riwayat pesakit tersebut. So the doctor acts upon it. The doctor actually introduces an external agent to immediately put to end the life of the patient. Okay, but withholding and withdrawal of treatment, life-sustaining treatment, is considered an omission, because what the doctor does is the doctor just refrains from acting anymore. Okay, the doctor allows the patient to naturally die, for the death to take place naturally. So the doctor refrains from doing anything. The doctor does not take any extraordinary measures, because there is nothing more that medicine can do. Okay, because it is futile. The treatment is futile, tidak lagi dapat membuat apa-apa, ataupun the treatment no longer benefits the patient, tidak akan dapat memberi apa-apa manfaat kepada pesakit tersebut. Jadi the doctors decide not to do anything, to discontinue what they're doing. Okay, and the difference as well is that euthanasia is immediately an act that stops nature from running its course. Okay, jadi dia immediately, dia secara langsung dan secara terusnya menamatkan riwayat pesakit tersebut. Tetapi withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, the doctors just withdraw the life support and allows death to take place naturally, and at all times trying to make the patient as comfortable as possible ketika dia dalam keadaan nazak lah, ketika maut itu menghampiri. Okay, so euthanasia is illegal, okay, dari segi undang-undang, because the intention is to terminate life. So it's equivalent to murder, seolah-olah membunuh pesakit tersebut. Tetapi mahkamah menetapkan bahawa withholding and withdrawal of treatment itu tidak menyalahi undang-undang, so it's not illegal, because when the treatment is futile, when doctors can do no more to cure the patient, then the doctor is not under a duty to act under the law. Okay, and the intention is not to put an end to the patient, but to alleviate excessive burden, meringankan beban yang ditanggung oleh pesakit kerana nyawanya telah dipanjangkan secara artificial, okay, artificial prolonging the death. So the intention of withholding life support is to not put excessive burden to the patient, and because the treatment is already futile, the treatment is not doing anything more for the patient. So those were the legal principles laid down in the Bland case. Okay, now also the court explained the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment daripada dua kategori pesakit. Okay, so ada prinsip undang-undang yang terpakai untuk kategori-kategori pesakit apabila doktor-doktor memutuskan untuk menarik balik rawatan penjagaan hayat tersebut. Okay, so the two categories of patients are patients who are mentally capable and patients who are incompetent. Let's discuss patients who are mentally capable first. Okay, so what we mean by patients who are mentally capable are patients who are able to make decisions on their own, dapat menentukan hala tuju rawatan kesihatan masing-masing kerana dia dalam keadaan sedar, dia sakit dia tapi dia sedar, dia boleh membuat keputusan sendiri secara waras. Okay, in that situation, if that patient who is mentally capable refuses life-sustaining treatment, tidak mahu doktor untuk memberikan dia rawatan penjagaan hayat, okay, then doctors must respect that patient's opinion, that patient's request. The doctors must respect the patient's refusal. The doctor cannot give the patient any life-sustaining treatment. Okay, the doctor must refrain from doing so. If the doctor decides to go on with the treatment when the patient has refused, then the doctor might be liable under the law for committing a criminal offence. Okay, boleh jadi doktor itu melakukan kesalahan jenayah. Okay, kerana for example under the offence of trespass to person. Saya rasa kalau belajar undang-undang tort, ada diajar tentang trespass to person, pencerobohan ke atas diri. Okey, tidak ada siapa boleh menyentuh kita melainkan kita membenarkannya. Jadi kalau doktor tetap mahu beri rawatan penjagaan hayat yang mana pesakit dah kata dia tidak mahu, maka doktor itu akan melakukan kesalahan jenayah, pencerobohan ke atas diri pesakit, trespass to person, and also maybe battery melakukan luka kepada pesakit tanpa izin. Okay, so that is the concept of patient autonomy. Yeah, the patient's right to self-determination, the patient's right to do whatever the patient wants in relation to medical treatment for his body. Okay, so patient autonomy is actually a defense for doctors. Okay, kalau nanti dikatakan kenapa tidak merawat pesakit ini, doktor boleh cakap kerana pesakit ini tidak mahu. Bila pesakit ini tidak mahu, saya tidak boleh berbuat demikian. Jadi itu merupakan satu perlindungan undang-undang yang diberi kepada doktor. If the doctor respects the patient's autonomy, then the doctor will not be found liable for anything that happens. Okay, for during the withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Itu untuk pesakit yang sedar, dia ada hak untuk menentukan rawatannya. What happens to patients who are unconscious? Tidak sedarkan diri, macam Anthony Bland tadi kan? Dia tidak sedarkan diri, dia tidak ada fungsi kognitif lagi. Okay, so incompetent patients are patients who are very, very young, who are not mature enough to make a decision, or patients who are unconscious, unable to participate in the decision-making process. So how do we withdraw from patients like this? This is based on the principle of best interest. Baik untuk kepentingan pesakit tersebut. Now, the factors that are considered are not just clinical examination, keadaan klinik pesakit tersebut. Tetapi untuk menentukan apa yang terbaik untuk pesakit, the doctors must consider medical, social, moral and welfare considerations of the patient as a whole. Dia akan lihat aspek-aspek yang pelbagai untuk menentukan sama ada tindakan itu yang terbaik atau tidak untuk pesakit. Okay. Also, a case law has laid down that the patient's wishes and values are also very important. What would have the patient wanted? Did the patient say anything about the fact that if he is intubated and he's no longer, he's living in a persistent vegetative state, then he wants all these tubes to be taken out and let him just die naturally? Adakah dia pernah bercakap begitu, memberitahu doktor begitu? Kalau tidak, then the doctors will have to discuss with the patient's family members. Okay, the close family members of the patient. What were the patient's requests? Did he mention anything about this situation if it happens? Is he a religious person? If he's a religious person, does he hold true to the religious values? Okay, so those are the factors that the doctor will consider before withdrawing life-sustaining treatment. Okay. So now that I have discussed the common law position, we now go to what about Malaysia? Does Malaysia have any laws regarding these two end-of-life decisions, which are euthanasia and withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment? Okay, now, I have to tell you that Malaysia does not have any laws specifically, undang-undang khas yang khusus berkaitan ini. Tidak ada. Apa yang kita ada adalah kanun kesiksaan ataupun penal code in Malaysia. Jadi penal code ini adalah satu statut undang-undang yang menggariskan apakah kesalahan jenayah di Malaysia dan apakah hukuman yang dikenakan ke atas kesalahan jenayah tersebut. Okay, so it's a code which lays down all the criminal offences in Malaysia. So we can see in the penal code that they don't mention euthanasia specifically. But if we look at the interpretation of section 299 and also exception 5 to section 300 of the Malaysian Penal Code, we can actually infer, kita boleh tafsirkan bahawa euthanasia termasuk di bawah kesalahan jenayah yang itu. Okay, so euthanasia is not first degree murder. Dia bukan pembunuhan yang what do you call it? If I would translate it, dia bukan betul-betul membunuh lah. It's not first degree murder, murder of the first degree, but it falls under culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Okay, menyebabkan kematian itu tapi tidaklah dianggap sebagai benar-benar membunuh. Culpable homicide not amounting to murder in some jurisdictions in the world, for example in the US, is also known as manslaughter. So it's a lesser degree than murder itself. It's manslaughter. Okay, why is it of a lesser degree? Bukan tidak bersalah ya, akan didapati bersalah, akan dihukum, tetapi hukuman itu tidak seberat hukuman membunuh betul-betul. Okay, kerana in euthanasia there is an element of the consent of the patient. Kerana pesakit itu sendiri meminta untuk membenarkan untuk doktor menamatkan riwayat beliau. Okay, so that is why it falls under the second category of culpable homicide, which is manslaughter. Okay. Now, what about withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment? To me, this is the interesting part in the Malaysian law because we also don't have anything specifically talking about withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Kita tidak ada undang-undang, yang kita ada adalah kod-kod etika perubatan dan peraturan-peraturan, guidelines. Okay, garis panduan itu kita ada, but we don't have a law which says is withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment legal or illegal. So we look at the penal code again, dan kita dapati bahawa ada beberapa peruntukan undang-undang dan some provisions in the penal code that can help us draw a conclusion whether withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment is legal or not legal. Okay, is legal or prohibited. So under section 32 of the penal code, it says that an act under the penal code extends to an illegal omission. So act and illegal omission are considered to be in the same category. The question is now, is the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment an illegal omission? Sebab kita dah tentukan tadi kan, euthanasia itu satu act, it's an act. Withholding, withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment itu adalah omission, the refusal to act. So is that refusal to act illegal? Kalau dia illegal, dia akan tertangkap di bawah kanun keseksaan. It will be prohibited. So the section that can help us come to this conclusion is section 43, which defines what is an illegal omission. Now, illegal omission needs to satisfy either one of these three conditions. Dia perlu memenuhi salah satu daripada kondisi di bawah section 43 Kanun Keseksaan Malaysia. Yang pertama sekali, kalau that omission, that refusal to act, is specifically mentioned under the penal code as an offence, then that omission is considered to be an offence. Tetapi seperti mana yang saya terangkan tadi, tidak ada apa-apa peruntukan undang-undang di dalam Kanun Keseksaan Malaysia yang mengatakan bahawa tidak boleh doktor menarik balik life-sustaining treatment. There is no such provision stating that. Jadi dia tidak memenuhi kondisi pertama, tidak memenuhi syarat pertama. Adakah dia memenuhi syarat kedua untuk dikenali sebagai satu kesalahan jenayah? Now, the second condition says that, okay, if that illegal omission is not stated anywhere in the penal code itself, but if it is stated to be an offence, satu kesalahan di dalam undang-undang yang lain selain daripada undang-undang kanun keseksaan, undang-undang jenayah. Okay, so in Malaysia, we don't have any laws which talk about the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, the legality of it. So, dia juga tidak memenuhi syarat yang kedua because no other law prohibits it. Okay, let's look at the third condition. Now, this third condition is the one that required a bit of research. Okay, if that omission, the refusal to act, is a ground for civil action, boleh dihadapkan ke mahkamah kalau ia merupakan satu kesalahan civil. Okay, jadi kalau itu berlaku maknanya that illegal omission is considered to be also a criminal offence. Okay, so common law dictates that if you are under a legal duty to act, then if you do not perform that act, you will be liable. Okay, itu adalah prinsip umum. Okay, when we come to duty of care. Duty of care. Kalau dalam undang-undang TOT itu ada duty of care kan? Saya rasa ni Dr. Andrew dia paling tahulah, dia paling cekap dan pakar tentang duty of care. So, if you are put in a position where you are obliged to act, that if you do not act, you will be found to be liable for not acting. Okay, kalau kita ada obligasi untuk bertindak dan kita tidak bertindak, maka apabila kita tidak bertindak, kita didapati bersalah, melakukan satu kesalahan. What about doctors? What is the legal duty of care for doctors? Is the doctor under a duty to act in the case of withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment? Adakah doktor perlu meneruskan rawatan penjagaan kesihatan di akhir hayat ini? Now, you will remember that I said, when the treatment is futile, sia-sia, tidak lagi membawa manfaat kepada pesakit, rawatan itu dah tak boleh buat apa-apa dari segi perubatan, rawatan itu pun tidak mendatangkan manfaat, malah membebankan lagi pesakit, then the doctor is not under a duty to continue the treatment. So the duty of care of a doctor stops when the treatment is futile. Okay? So therefore, if the doctor decides to withdraw futile treatment, the doctor will not be considered to have committed an illegal omission kerana dia tidak ada tanggungjawab untuk meneruskan. Okay, so because the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment ini tidak memenuhi mana-mana ketiga-tiga syarat di bawah Section 43, maka ia tidak merupakan satu kesalahan jenayah apabila doktor memutuskan untuk menarik balik rawatan penjagaan di akhir hayat. I hope you follow me so far, ya, insyaAllah. Okay, so this is a summary that I've made. This is how the penal code looks lah. Okay, statute berkaitan dengan kesalahan jenayah itu di Malaysia. So when the treatment no longer benefits the patient or would cause the patient further burden and discomfort, the doctor will no longer be duty bound. Okay, and the doctor, when he is not duty bound, he is not ethically or legally obliged to continue providing the futile treatment. Tapi saya perlu ingatkan di sini, itu bukan bermakna doktor terus meninggalkan dan mengabaikan pesakit. It does not mean that the doctor abandons the patient fully, okay, and let him die of his own accord. No, no, no. The doctor is still under a duty to make sure that the patient is accorded comfort and care until his life ends. Jadi tanggungjawab untuk memastikan keselesaan pesakit, pastikan pesakit itu tidak berada, you give him opioids. Opioids means simply put are painkillers, any type of medication that can help the patient to not feel the pain, to feel as comfortable as possible, okay? That is a duty that the doctor still needs to carry out. So the treatment to cure has ended, but the treatment to care for the patient still continues until the very end. Okay, now we come to that part of my presentation in which we will talk about what happened in Malaysia, that critical moment yang mana ventilator tidak mencukupi. This also happened in many other countries in Asia, in India, I think in Indonesia as well. I've read newspaper cuttings in which bekalan oksigen itu tidak mencukupi. Okay, so how do doctors justify their acts in having to choose which patient gets the ventilator? Okay, so we have the concept of distributive justice. Okay, it's one of the biomedical principles. Okay, ada biomedical principles, ada apa? Ada autonomy, ada beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, also sanctity of life, kan? So it's one of them, justice. So justice requires for equity, not equality, to be exercised in distributing healthcare resources and services. Apakah beza equality and equity? Equality is kesamarataan. Maknanya semua orang dapat benda yang sama. Tidak boleh membeza-bezakan. Tetapi that is not the concept of justice. The concept of justice is equity needs to be exercised. Okay, perlu beri kepada mana yang lebih berhak. That's equity. Dan ini juga sama ya dalam the concept of al-qist dalam Islam, kan? Al-qist itu bermaksud meletakkan sesuatu pada tempat yang sepatutnya, bukan menyamaratakan semua hak. Yeah, so that's exactly what justice is about also in Western biomedical principles. Okay, what this means is that you have to fairly adjudicate, menentukan dalam memberi rawatan kesihatan kepada pesakit, you have to consider individual interests, kepentingan individu, and also societal interests. Okay, kepentingan awam. You have to balance it out. And this is what we know as microallocation. Microallocation adalah terma yang digunakan when you ration or when you distribute limited medical resources in end-of-life care. So what constitutes microallocation is that you have to create a balance between the treatment's likelihood of success. Okay, and what this means is that kebarangkalian rawatan itu untuk memberi manfaat kepada pesakit. Kita kena tengok daripada aspek itu. Okay, we have to see whether we should distribute it to persons who can reasonably benefit, yang betul-betul akan mendapat manfaat daripada rawatan itu. So we have to consider giving it to those who will benefit. Okay, and then medical utility. Now medical utility is when you maximize the patient's welfare and needs. Sebanyak mungkin kita cuba memastikan kebajikan pesakit itu terpelihara dengan memberikan rawatan itu. Juga perlu diseimbangkan dengan the avoidance of wastage, pembaziran, and inappropriate utilization of resources. Okay, perlu dielakkan daripada sumber-sumber itu diberi kepada pesakit yang tidak akan mendapat manfaat, dan kalau kita berikan kepada mereka, pesakit lain yang akan menderita atau akan tidak akan dapat diselamatkan, sedangkan pesakit lain itu lebih memerlukan ataupun lebih akan mendapat manfaat daripada rawatan itu. Okay, so these are the three factors that doctors and doctors and healthcare providers di peringkat hospital, pengurusan hospital itu sendiri perlu fikirkan apabila membuat satu keputusan untuk siapa yang perlu diberi rawatan penjagaan di akhir hayat apabila sumber-sumber tidak mencukupi. Okay, alright. Now also when we talk about avoidance of wastage and inappropriate utilization of resources, you must be able to treat and save more people. You cannot just concentrate on certain individuals, but you must be able to use the resources to save more people. Okay, now what time is it? Oh, it's almost 1 hour. hopefully I can finish on time. I'm going to the second part, or actually it's the last part of my presentation, which talks about the Islamic perspective, okay? Perspective Islam, tentang withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. So let me just start by talking generally about the ruling on seeking of treatment in Islam. Kita tahu sebagai orang Islam, apabila kita diduga diuji dengan kesakitan dan ujian-ujian lain, those are all means of purifying our souls. Apabila kita tabah, sabar menghadapi ujian sebaik mungkin, maka itu adalah cara untuk kita membersihkan diri daripada dosa. Okay, so patience, perseverance are important in order for us to reap the rewards, okay, of this dunya and also in the hereafter. But the beautiful thing about Islam is that it does not prohibit its followers to also seek treatment. Kalau bersabar atas sakit itu ada pahalanya, ada ganjarannya. Kalau terus untuk mencari ubat untuk mengubati pesakit itu juga diberi ganjaran oleh Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. So it's permissible and recommended for you to seek treatment. Okay. Now, what about treatment at the end of life? In which category does this fall upon? And a lot of scholars have agreed with the classification by Ibn Taymiyyah radhiyallahu anhu that it is optional, ya. Kalau bercakap tentang penjagaan kesihatan di akhir hayat, itu adalah pilihan, optional. Because at that point of time, whether the treatment will succeed or whether it will harm you is uncertain, tidak tentu. Jadi terpulang kepada pesakit sama ada mahu mendapatkan rawatan. Tidak salah untuk tidak mendapatkan rawatan, tidak berdosa untuk pergi mendapatkan rawatan. Okay. These are several authorities from the Quran and also the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that I have taken. There are many authorities in the Quran and in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talk about the illegality of euthanasia, yang tidak dibenarkan untuk euthanasia itu dilakukan. So ini adalah antaranya. Okay. In Islam, when we talk about euthanasia, dia berkait dengan prinsip yang mana perlu mengutamakan nyawa. This is on euthanasia, ya. Maknanya tidak boleh mengambil nyawa seseorang itu sesuka hati, because the sanctity of life is above everything else, is given a special position over everything else. So any form of euthanasia is strictly prohibited because it is equivalent to suicide and murder. Okay, and the sanctity of life yang dikatakan sebagai inviolability principle ini adalah sama maksudnya dengan sanctity of life, kemuliaan nyawa itu mengatasi hak individu untuk menentukan apa yang boleh dibuat tentang diri dia, okay? Patient autonomy. So that's why in Islam, even if the patient says, I want to die like this, I cannot stand the pain anymore, I do not want to be living in this condition, I want the doctor to put an end to my life, itu tidak dibenarkan. Patient autonomy is limited in that sense. You cannot ask a person to put you to death. Okay? Di dalam Islam. Now, this is because kita sebagai umat Islam, kita percaya bahawa hak eksklusif untuk menghidupkan dan mematikan itu adalah hak mutlak Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. It's the exclusive prerogative of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. It does not belong to us humans. But that's not the only reason, wisdom behind it. Okay? The wisdom behind it as well, apart from that, is that if you allow euthanasia to be practiced, then that will destroy society. It will infract the societal fabric. Dia akan menjadikan masyarakat itu kacau bilau dan masyarakat itu akan musnah disebabkan kebebasan untuk mematikan diri, memohon untuk dimatikan diri atau mematikan orang lain secara bebas. Okay, dan kalau kita lihat daripada segi maqasid asy-syariah, okay, the euthanasia actually violates hifdzun nafs, preservation of life, hifdzuddin, preservation of religion, protection of religion, and hifdzun nasal, which is preservation of progeny. So you can see from my slides, ya. Jadi kerana itu euthanasia memang tidak dibenarkan di dalam Islam. Tetapi Islam memandang withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment ini dibolehkan. Okay, berdasarkan 3 faktor. Okay, so you have on the basis of medical futility, on the basis of distributive justice, and on the basis of patient autonomy. Tiga faktor ini membolehkan withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment to take place in Islam. Can you just excuse me for a minute while I close the door, because I think there's some disturbance in the noise, kan? Just bear with me for a moment, yeah? Really sorry for the interruption, really sorry. Macam tu lah bila bekerja di rumah, ya. So sorry. Okay, now we are going to first discuss on the basis of medical futility. What is the Islamic perspective on medical futility? Now, in Islam, we believe that we should seek treatment, okay, when we are ill, and doctors are under a duty of care in Islam to treat and cure the patient. But the responsibility to cure the patient does not extend to the fact that the doctor must do all necessary measures to preserve the life of the patient, you know, regardless of any consequences. Okay, dia tidaklah sehingga doktor itu perlu melakukan apa sahaja untuk memastikan bahawa nyawa pesakit ini dipanjangkan at all costs. Okay, Islam does not lay down those principles, okay, because we have limits as human beings, we have limits as Muslims, and we know that at some point of time we'll have to let nature take its course, because Allahu A'lam, kan, Allah lebih mengetahui. So when the treatment is futile and death is inevitable, okay, the obligation of a doctor to prolong life ceases to be mandatory. Okay, tidak perlu untuk berusaha untuk terus menerus memanjangkan riwayat pesakit itu sehingga kan secara artificialnya pun you know, even to the extent of artificially prolonging the life. No, that is not allowed in Islam. So this is based on permissibility. The permissibility is based on the duty to remove harm, okay, also known as non-maleficence in modern bioethical perspectives, principles, because the intention of a doctor when he wants to withdraw futile treatment is that he is trying to stop the patient from being overly burdened by that futile treatment. Rawatan itu tidak lagi mendatangkan manfaat, tidak lagi berhasil. Jadi untuk mengekalkan patient dalam keadaan itu yang mana dia dalam keadaan hidup atau mati, dan sebenarnya dia hidup tu hanya kerana kebergantungannya kepada mesin itu, maka itu adalah satu darar ataupun a harm that needs to be avoided. Okay, and also the intention of the doctor is not to put an end to the patient's life, okay, but to remove that excessive burden and to allow death to take its natural course. Okay. The second factor in which permits the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment is patient autonomy. Jadi kalau kita lihat kepada hadis di dalam Sahih Al-Bukhari, hadis ini adalah di translation, terjemahannya dalam bahasa Inggeris. Kita lihat bahawa berlaku ya pada zaman Rasulullah SAW itu sendiri, yang mana dia daripada perbuatannya dia tidak mahu mengambil ubat yang disuakan ke mulutnya oleh para sahabat pada ketika itu. Itu Rasulullah SAW dalam keadaan dia tidak sedarkan diri. Okay, dia antara sedar dengan tidak kerana dia demam yang agak teruk pada waktu itu ya. Tapi bila sahabat nak berikan ubat, dia menolak-nolak. Jadi bila dia telah sedar, dia tanya kepada sahabat, kenapa kamu memaksa aku memakan ubat tersebut sedangkan telah aku tunjukkan bahawa aku tidak mahu. Jadi that shows the extent of patient autonomy in Islam, that you can refuse medical treatment. It's allowed for you to refuse medical treatment. Okay? And this was also the practice of the companions of the Prophet SAW, contohnya Abu Bakar As-Siddiq dan Mu'adz ibn Jabal radhiyallahu anhuma, who refused medical treatment at the final stages of their illnesses. Okay. Now, the authorities that we have seen in the Quran and in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are now incorporated in several medical codes, also in a lot of fatwa all over the world. And I'm just highlighting to you one of that fatwa, which is the fatwa issued by the Permanent Committee for Ifta of Saudi. Okay, you can see that if treatment is futile, Okay, it is permissible for doctors to discontinue such treatment on the condition that two competent doctors, okay, two competent specialists have confirmed that the treatment is futile and death will be inevitable, akan take place. Okay, it's also imbued, that principle, in the Islamic Code for Medical and Health Ethics under paragraphs A and B of Article 62. Boleh lihat ya. Saya akan bagi slide ini kepada Dr. Angio untuk dikongsikan kepada semua pelajar, semua yang menonton hari ini ya, untuk manfaat kita bersama insya-Allah taala. Okay, so now we go to the final part dan dah selesai dah pukul berapa sekarang? Okay, insya-Allah saya akan selesaikan segera. On withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment with regards to distributive justice. Okay, so that is also a concept in Islam where Islam recognizes the resource allocation in end-of-life care as a legitimate concern, because doctors might find them to be in a situation where they have to choose which patient is more entitled to receive the ventilator. Siapa pesakit yang lebih berhak untuk diberikan alat bantuan pernafasan itu. Okay, jadi Islam membenarkannya di bawah konsep distributive justice, dan apabila mengimbangkan, to balance the maqasid al-syariah, because when you talk about limited resources and you talk about life-sustaining treatment, there are two maqasid that are relevant. That is hifdhul nafs and hifdhul mal, preservation of property. So they are put in a situation where the doctor needs to balance it, okay, and to see. And usually when there's a competition for the same scarce resources, sumber perubatan yang terhad in the delivery of end-of-life care, this needs to be examined between these two maqasid syariah. And if the treatment is futile, what happens is that hifdhul nafs itu perlu memberi jalan kepada hifdhul mal. So the preservation of life will give way to the protection of property, which are the medical resources. Yeah. Okay. How do you balance between the interests? It's also there are some considerations that you need to evaluate, which is the patient's quality of life, quality hidup pesakit itu. Kalau diteruskan dengan rawatan itu, adakah dia akan lebih baik? Adakah dia akan kembali sedar? Adakah dia akan ada quality hidup sebagai seorang manusia? Okay. And also the need to avoid putting such resources to waste. Tidak boleh memberikannya kepada satu-satu individu dengan menyebabkan kepentingan awam itu terkesan ataupun terjejas ya. So these are the two considerations in trying to balance between the competition of limited resources. Okay, ini adalah beberapa qawaid al-fiqhiyah saya kira, okay, ataupun legal maxim, Islamic legal maxims that talk about the need to balance this out according to distributive justice in Islam. Kita ada daf'u a'zam al-mafsadain bi-ihtimal aisarihima. Okay, and al-maslahatul ammah muqaddamatun ala al-maslahatil khassah. Public interest is to be given priority over the consideration of individual interests. And you can see as well, yatahammalu ad-darar al-khas lidaf'i ad-darar al-'am. Okay, an individual may have to sustain a harm in order to protect and prevent harm to a larger group of people. So these are the methods in Islamic jurisprudence, in usul al-fiqh, that can be used to justify the actions of a doctor in withdrawing life-sustaining treatment. Okay, we have come to the end. This is a conclusion. I don't intend to read out the conclusion, but I hope by now you understand withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment is not euthanasia. It's very much different. Okay, and from both the legal Malaysian law, common law and Islamic perspectives, when the interventions are considered to be futile and can no longer benefit the patient, there is no ethical or legal obligation to continue the treatment. So it's justified for doctors to do so. It's not an easy decision, but it's ethically supported by the law and also in Islam. Okay. Just to share with you, I have actually written a piece on this by perspektif bioetika dan modern Islam dalam memilih antara dua nyawa. Saya menulis ini kerana pada waktu itu ramai yang tidak faham apa yang dihadapi oleh seorang doktor, keputusan yang sangat sukar yang perlu dibuat dalam memilih siapa untuk diberikan ventilator. Jadi waktu itu saya rasa perlu untuk masyarakat umum di Malaysia faham bahawa ini dibolehkan berdasarkan syarat-syarat tertentu di dalam dari perspektif bioetika dan juga perspektif Islam. Saya menulis makalah ini, artikel ini bersama dengan sahabat saya di USIM, seorang pensyarah syariah yang ada kepakaran dalam maqasid asy-syariah, dan diterbitkan dalam Berita Harian. Berita Harian ini adalah akhbar utamalah di Malaysia. Jadi boleh kalau nak membacanya dalam bahasa Melayu, mungkin dapat menambahkan pemahaman tentang apa yang saya terangkan pada hari ini. So with that, I wish to thank you so much for bearing with me, for listening to me for an hour plus on the topic. And I welcome any sharing, any discussion afterwards on the topic. You can also contact me if you have any intention to discuss further, probably collaborate with me on my research on end-of-life care. This is my email address, yeah? Okay. So I return the platform back to my friend, my colleague, Dr. Andrio. Terima kasih.
Very much, Dr. Fadlina. That was very interesting presentation. Okay, interesting not only because this is an actual issue, but also because the student come across with some new and strange terms, especially in bahasa Malaysia. So I think I need to clarify some terms to allow student to understand. Oke, saudara sekalian, tadi kita mendengar presentasi yang sangat menarik, ya, yang membuat tambah menarik karena ada istilah-istilah baru yang mungkin terasa asing di telinga kita. Nah, saya ingin memberikan penjelasan ya supaya kita bisa memahami apa yang tadi disampaikan ya. Tadi disebutkan bahwa berkaitan dengan hukum yang mengatur tentang isu ini atau topik ini terdapat lakuna. Lakuna itu dalam bahasa kita adalah kekosongan hukum atau rehvakum dalam bahasa Belanda. Ya. Nah, sepanjang hukum tidak mengatur, maka di Malaysia akan mengambil apa yang berlaku di common law, yaitu putusan pengadilan di Inggris. Ya. Makanya hukum di Malaysia itu selain mengacu pada undang-undang, undang-undang in bahasa Indonesia is statute. Undang-undang means statute, ya.
Undang-undang itu statute.
Mengacu pada undang-undang juga mengacu pada putusan hakim yang disebut dengan case law, ya, yang berlaku di Malaysia. Tadi juga disebut dengan istilah pesakit, ya. Pesakit means pasien, ya, artinya pasien. Ya. Lalu ada kata-kata yang unik, ya. Tadi disebut ada undang-undang jenazah. Undang-undang jenazah ada artinya hukum pidana. Sedangkan kesalahan jenazah artinya tindak pidana. Tadi disinggung ketika mendiskusikan tentang isu eutanasia. Ya, eutanasia merupakan kesalahan jenazah, artinya merupakan tindak pidana, perbuatan yang dapat dijatuhi sanksi pidana.
Saya kira itu mesti sebab saya pun belajar rumah baru.
Jadi we call law hukum, ya. In bahasa Indonesia law means hukum. If we use the term undang-undang, undang-undang in bahasa Indonesia means statute.
Statute. Ada bedanya.
Oke, pada akhirnya kita sampai pada satu pembahasan yang sangat menarik tentang boleh tidaknya dokter menghentikan pengobatan yang bersifat memperpanjang kehidupan. Nah, tadi dikatakan itu bisa diperbolehkan, ya, permissible atau legal, itu syaratnya apabila ya pengobatan itu bersifat sia-sia, ya, diteruskan tidak akan bisa menyembuhkan, ya, atau disebut dengan futile, ya. Medical futility itu istilah yang digunakan untuk menyebut satu tindakan medis yang tidak ada manfaatnya bagi pasien. Ya, kemudian juga ada pertimbangan dari sisi keadilan atau justice, ya, mengacu pada prinsip distributive justice, ya, maka dokter dan rumah sakit harus berpikir tentang siapa yang paling berhak menggunakan fasilitas. Ya, kalau jumlah alatnya terbatas, yang membutuhkan banyak, maka ya dipilih mana yang paling berhak. Nah, itulah yang disebut dengan prinsip equity, bukan equality tapi equity. Ya, nah kita pernah menghadapi kasus serupa di Indonesia ya, ketika begitu banyak pasien COVID dibawa ke rumah sakit ya, atau hospital. Ya, semua pasien, bukan semua ya, mostly banyak pasien yang membutuhkan tabung oksigen, ya kan? Jadi oksigennya free, ya, tapi pasien tidak boleh menghirup oksigen secara langsung. Dia perlukan alat, ya, salah satunya menggunakan tabung oksigen. Nah, tabungnya yang limited. Nah, disitulah kemudian ya mesti adil dalam menentukan siapa yang berhak untuk menggunakan alat itu. Nah, di sisi yang lain, ya, pasien yang memang menghadapi kondisi yang futile, ya, ditolong pun percuma, nah, tidak perlu ditolong karena alatnya akan lebih berguna untuk orang lain yang lebih membutuhkan. Nah, ini prinsip distributive justice. Ya. Dan yang terakhir tadi juga ada satu justifikasi dari sisi refusal of the patient. Ya. Jadi kalau pasien menolak untuk diobati, ya itu adalah satu pembelaan, ya, satu pembenaran untuk menghentikan pengobatan. Saya kira itu yang bisa saya klarifikasi, ya. Mudah-mudahan kita mendapatkan pemahaman yang lebih baik. Ya. Okay, right now I would offer to the student to participate in this discussion. Yeah. Please, any student, yeah, feel free if you want to ask some questions. Yeah, please feel free to deliver your questions. Dr. Fadlina will be very happy to answer your questions. Ada yang mau bertanya silahkan. Boleh dengan bahasa Indonesia, saya bantu translate. Silakan. Silakan, jangan malu, jangan takut bertanya. Feel free. Oke. Okay. Mana nih yang mau bertanya nih? Silakan ya. Dokter Fadlina, sambil menunggu yang lain bertanya, barangkali saya akan gunakan kesempatan untuk diskusi ya.
Jom. Silakan, Dr. Andrew. Doktor, mikrofonnya mute. Saya tidak dengar.
Okay, when we discuss about the withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, sometimes people also confused with some other concepts, especially euthanasia, as you have explained just now. That sometimes, people confuse on that matters, and you have clarified that euthanasia is totally different from what we have discussed just now about the withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Okay, my questions is, before I deliver my questions, when we talk about euthanasia, there is a specific form of euthanasia. Yeah, specific form of euthanasia. Usually, people call it a passive voluntary euthanasia. Passive refer to the omissions, yeah, from the doctor. So the doctor do not take any action, yeah, but just leave the patient without any medical assistance. And voluntary means that there is a consent from the patient. So if this is the case, we call it passive voluntary euthanasia. So is it different from what we have discussed about withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment? What do you think, Dr. Fadlina?
That is a very, very cogent, legitimate question. It is very interesting. And I normally get this question whenever I discuss about withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Okay, jadi dalam apabila saya membuat kajian saya, Dr. Andrew, sememangnya mulanya saya fikir berfikir untuk menggunakan terma passive voluntary euthanasia untuk menggambarkan the withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, because in many literatures the word passive euthanasia has been used to refer to withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Tetapi saya mendapati bahawa tidak wajar dan sebenarnya agak tidak tepat untuk menggunakan terma passive euthanasia. One of my findings is that we should not use the term passive euthanasia anymore because it is very confusing. Yeah, and if you look in the United States and in the UK, di Amerika Syarikat dan di tanah Inggeris itu in England, they have stopped using passive euthanasia. They do not agree for the term to be used because it confuses between euthanasia itself and the legality of withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Euthanasia itu adalah berlaku dengan niat untuk menamatkan riwayat pesakit. Jadi bila diletakkan perkataan pasif di depannya, dia seolah-olah dua terma yang berlawanan. Euthanasia menamatkan riwayat pesakit, berniat untuk menamatkan riwayat pesakit tetapi diadakan secara omission. Sedangkan withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment itu tidak langsung berniat untuk menamatkan riwayat pesakit tapi kerana perawatan itu telah sia-sia. Dan ini sebenarnya untuk membantu pesakit untuk menjalani hari-hari terakhirnya dengan lebih selesa tanpa terbeban dengan rawatan-rawatan yang tidak lagi mendatangkan manfaat. Jadi many scholars have said that you cannot put the word passive and euthanasia together, and that is why I never mentioned it in my presentation and in any of my writings, because I agree with the opinion of doctors that euthanasia is strictly euthanasia. Dan satu kategori yang lain tu melibatkan omission itu hanyalah dalam withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Saya juga telah berbincang dengan doktor-doktor di Malaysia dan rata-rata memang tidak mahu menggunakan terma tersebut. So it's actually the same thing, correct, Dr. Andrew? Kalau dilihat kepada penulisan di Barat yang masih menggunakannya, bukan di US ataupun UK, di negara-negara Eropah lain contohnya, itu memang sebenarnya yang dimaksudkan adalah passive euthanasia itu adalah withholding and withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Tapi kerana dua terma itu mengelirukan dan memberi konteks yang salah sebenarnya, maka tidak harusnya digunakan terma passive euthanasia itu lagi. Itu jawapan saya.
Thank you very much. Okay, dear audiences, please, we still have 10 minutes to discuss. So please feel free jangan takut, jangan malu untuk bertanya. Bisa dengan bahasa Indonesia, saya bantu translate nanti.
Marilah berbicara dengan Dr. Ina. Dr. Ina semua berjumpa dengan pelajar-pelajar dari Indonesia dan semuanya membuka kamera. Bagus ni. Kalau pelajar-pelajar saya semua tutup, tak nak buka, paksa pun tak nak buka kamera.
Oke, mungkin karena lama mengikuti kuliah online jadi dia tidak lagi kurang selesa untuk bertanya. Tapi saya harus encourage them, please jangan malu silahkan, mumpung kita bertemu dengan dosen tamu ini jarang-jarang bisa bertemu di kesempatan yang seperti ini Kalau ada yang ingin klarifikasi, ingin bertanya, silahkan jangan malu.
Excuse me. Yes, Miss. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So I have a question about. Actually, it's not a question, but a things that I feel curious. So the question is, can I know what is the difference about this withholding and withdrawal of lives between Indonesia and Malaysian laws? Thank you.
Wow. Dr. Andrew, ini adalah rancangan kita untuk menulis bersama. Yes. Dah ada pelajar yang bertanya ini. Soalan yang sangat baik, Nazwa. Barakallahu fiki.
Thank you so much, Miss.
Tapi saya tidak ada jawapan untuknya buat masa ini kerana saya memang mahu mengetahui di Indonesia nya bagaimana, dan saya mahu menulis bersama dengan Dr. Andrew satu penulisan komparatif antara undang-undang Malaysia dan undang-undang Indonesia.
Oke, terima kasih Nazwa. Yang lainnya mana nih? Yang lain silakan. Oke, masih ada waktu 8 menit ya. Kita manfaatkan waktu yang bagus ini ya untuk diskusi. Danis mana Danis? Danis, Fitrah, ada yang mau bertanya?
Saya mau bertanya, Pak.
Oke, silakan. Siapa ini?
Pak.
Oke.
Maybe we can tweet question like for input. Okay. Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Maulana from Indonesia. My question is not specifically like Dr. Indrio because of the limitation of the knowledge I have. Okay. My question is, before this question has been explained, the euthanasia is not allowed in Islam. Then what if a person experiencing a very forced situation to take action? In this case, no family can be contact. How the doctor makes a discussion in this situation, like a force majeure situation?
It's a very good question. Masya Allah, Masya Allah. Allahumma barik. Terima kasih Muhammad Nuha Maulana Pasha. Okay, now this relates to my explanation. Yang saya jelaskan itu ada dua kategori, dipanggilnya pasien ya, patient dalam bahasa Indonesia. Okay, two category of patients. Now, I believe Muhammad Nuha is talking about what if the patient is unconscious, dia tidak boleh berkata-kata, membuat keputusan sendiri, dan dianya sebatang kara, tidak ada ataupun tidak ada ahli keluarga yang boleh dihubungi untuk diputuskan bersama whether to withhold or withdraw life-sustaining treatment. So, in that case, the doctor treating that patient, if there has been any discussion before he became unconscious regarding this, kalau ada diskusi yang berlaku, perbincangan antara patient itu dengan doktor itu tentang apakah yang akan berlaku sekiranya anda pada satu hari nanti hidupnya hanya bergantung kepada alat bantuan pernafasan. Okay? Kalau itu pernah dibincangkan dan patient telah memberikan gambaran bagaimana, then kita ikut kepada apa yang dibincangkan itu. Tetapi sekiranya that patient has never discussed this with the doctor because the condition was quite sudden, tiba-tiba dia tidak sedarkan diri dan sekarang ni ada dengan life support, okay, bergantung kepada life support, then the doctor will have to consider other factors. The doctor may not know what the patient wishes, the doctor cannot find out from the family. Jadi doktor itu kena tengok daripada segi clinical evaluation-nya, penilaian keadaan kesihatan pesakit itu, kualiti hidup pesakit itu, apakah yang akan berlaku jika diteruskan dengan rawatan ini, adakah harapan untuk pesakit itu sembuh, bagaimana keadaannya kalau dia berterusan dalam keadaan ini dan perlu dibawa pulang ke rumah, adakah ada orang yang boleh terus untuk menjaganya dalam keadaan itu. So social considerations, religious considerations, apakah agama pesakit itu, Islam membenarkan untuk perkara itu dilakukan. Kalau dia dalam agama lain, apakah kata-kata agama Buddha atau Hindu atau Christianity. Jadi selain daripada merujuk kepada ahli keluarga yang tidak ada untuk pesakit itu, maka doktor perlu mengambil kira perkara-perkara yang saya sebutkan tadi sebelum doktor memutuskan sama ada wajar atau tidak untuk menarik balik rawatan itu. Saya harap itu menjawab ya, Nuha, insyaAllah.
Thank you, Dr. Fadia.
Very good.
For me. Terima kasih.
Okay, one more question, please. One more question, please.
Your students are very good, Dr. Indrio. I like the question.
Okay, thank you Nazwa and Nuha ya. Fatra, do you have any questions?
One more?
Not yet, sir.
Okay. Okay, because the explanation was very comprehensive ya. So no rooms for us. I think it's
Hendra ini terlalu baik.
Okay, please, one more questions. Okay, otherwise I will end the session because we have right now already, at 3 plus 28, 2 minutes left. Okay, Dr. Fadlina, I think we have to end the session right now. So sorry because I believe that there are more questions from the students, but because the time constraint, we have to end the session very soon. And again, thank you very much for attending this public lecture as the guest speaker. We expect that we can again invite you in the future meeting ya. Oke, terima kasih juga kepada semua peserta yang sudah hadir dan bertahan dari awal sampai sekarang ya. Kita berangkat dengan peserta 100 lebih ya. Sekarang pun masih 100 lebih ya. So it's very nice. Oke.
Tadi yang tidur kan, alhamdulillah semua terjaga, alhamdulillah.
Kita akhiri dengan baca lafaz alhamdulillah bersama-sama. Alhamdulillah.